everybody, welcome back to another session here in the What's Next Beauty in 2021 Summit. And I am joined in this session by Fiona from the Red Tree. And we're going to be diving into the Red Tree's Accelerator Programme and also investment. So I'm going to hand over to Fiona and let her introduce herself properly and tell us a little bit about the Red Tree and what they do.
Great. Well, thank you so much for having me. Delighted to be here. So just to give you a really quick introduction, so the Red Tree is one of the UK's largest beauty consultancy companies. We have a very international basis, so 70% of our clients are international, and we do a really broad range of consultancy. I particularly work on the strategic project side of the business, and within that side we do a lot of commercial work with either brands, we do work with private equity houses as well, and major corporates. And we do that, we do a range of different projects within that, but a lot of it, and this kind of comes on to what we're going to speak about, a lot of it really centres around helping brands to launch, so looking at how much it's going to cost them and what they need to do in order to hit all of those milestones, from both a financial and strategic basis, but also just kind of getting that concept and the branding right as well. So we work very end to end with brands, bringing them, some of which from concept to launch, and other ones might be really well established, and then we'll work with them on a collaborative basis to help them grow that way.
And tell us a little bit about the team at Red Tree, because I've known them for quite a long time now, but there is so much talent and expertise in your team. It blows my mind. So do tell us a little bit about your background and the team that supports you.
Yeah, so I've been at the Red Tree nearly 2 years, one of which in lockdown. So two very different years. One had a lot more lunches in it.
And after work drinks.
Yeah, Charlotte Street. And then, so yeah, and I was at Superdrug for 5.5 years before then. So working predominantly as a senior buyer, worked on all of the categories there. So it's always a challenge to find a category that I've not worked on for Superdrug, and then be able to apply that to what we do with our clients, as well as like really relevant product development and trading experience, helping to answer the questions to our clients of, why is the buyer not coming back to me? They get a lot of emails. And yeah, the rest of the team. So Sterling Murray, our founder, he's been in the beauty industry, I think we'll say about 40 years. I hope he's okay with that. But yeah. Yeah, he's got fantastic experience of leading numerous brands such as Rimmel, which was then bought by Unilever, Estee Lauder and Bourjois. And then the rest of the team are really well versed in beauty, particularly digital. So we actually brought in a digital specialist just as lockdown was coming in as well. So, but we eat, breathe and sleep beauty, and yeah, we just love working with our clients and helping them to be more successful.
Now, just tell us how we can stay in contact with you after this session, because I know you've got an amazing sort of email newsletter that goes out, because I'm in on it, and it's always really, really interesting. And I know you share quite a lot of other experts in there. You do lots of events, so none of us want to miss out on that. So please tell us how we can stay in contact with you. And for those of you watching, when the video's over, scroll down to the comments and you'll find the links that Fiona's going to talk about now.
Yeah, so there's a link in there to our website and sign up to our newsletter so that you can get that. And that, what we're going to speak about in terms of the Beauty Accelerator, that's where you can get all of the updates on when our next applications will be opening for that. LinkedIn is our biggest social media platforms. So that's a really good source for all of the articles that we share, as well as Instagram and Facebook as well.
Oh,
So,
that's brilliant.
yeah, all the channels.
That's brilliant. So let's dive into it, because last year you guys launched the Beauty Accelerator with a big bang. It was so exciting to see it come out, because there aren't many beauty accelerators out there here in the UK. So I was really excited about it, and I would love you to tell everybody more about how it works, what it is, how they get involved, what it does, that kind of thing.
Sure. Well, I'll just kind of start on how we got there. And it was very much for that reason, Rachel, that we had noticed that there wasn't a UK specific beauty accelerator company. And we launched it in August of last year. And a few people said, oh, were you just really quiet in lockdown, so you decided to focus on it? And actually, we'd been thinking about it far earlier than that. And so the way it works is that it's a partnership with Startup Funding Capital, who are one of the leading early stage funds. We've worked with them for about 10 years. So we've kind of had brands that we've recommended to them and who have got investment that way. So we then decided that we wanted to set this up and discussed it and agreed it with them. They were really keen to do it because from their perspective, they'd invested in a couple of beauty brands, but they'd been successful, but they saw it as a great opportunity to invest in more. So the lead up to it was very much aligning on their funding round. So how do we align with that? And then getting the big bang of the marketing in place. So it was very much because we felt that it was underrepresented. Beauty itself as a category within investment, we felt was underrepresented as well. So you read investment press and it's very rare for you to actually see much on beauty as well. So that was one of the real objectives that we wanted as well, to champion beauty as an investment opportunity for investors. Particularly because I know we're biased because we work in the industry, but we think it's really exciting and there's so much great stuff going on innovation-wise. There's a lot of M&A activity, particularly for the larger companies. So we just wanted to see that represented a bit better in the overall investment world.
Mm. It's really interesting, isn't it? And we were talking just before we started the video in the kind of, I think investment in beauty is going to be quite a hot topic going forwards. The girls and the team at Create Beauty have been talking in this summit about the fact that there is an increased interest in female founded and BAME founded businesses. And I know that they are generally underrepresented when it comes to investment. So with the growth in demand for those, we may start to see that change in investment. And I guess the accelerator is there to support these brands, help them access this.
Yeah, and it's one of the main reasons as well that we wanted to do it is we wanted to combine our experience with beauty and launching brands with giving people the opportunity to do it. So it is exactly that as well, that we had a huge proportion of female founders. We actually had a huge proportion of male and female, so actually husband and wife
teams.
Yeah, there were a lot of them. And yeah, it was to use our experience to help drive that as well. So by working with them together to help them through that.
So for those of us who have heard about accelerators, but perhaps don't understand how they work, could you talk us through what they look like?
Yeah, well, I think some of them are different. So not every accelerator program is the same. So for ours, it took the form of, we set up this agreement with Startup Funding Capital. Within that agreement, the prize or end result, so to speak, was a minimum of 150k funding. I'll come back to that. There were a number of criteria that we put in place that was agreed between them. So I think that should be accessible via our website as well, but if there were any questions, we can obviously answer that. But the main things, one of the main criteria was that the business needed to be under 1 year old. And then there was a very thorough application form for us to understand about the business, its positioning, financial status, so on and so forth. And then I think we got over 40 applications there, which we were really pleased with because it's a brand new accelerator program. So we then started the interviews and we went through the interview process with semi-finals, and then we had a final of 6 brands, which was really tough to get down to. We felt a little bit like Dragon's Den as we were going through it, but very friendly dragons, we were told. So that's good. And yeah, so within the final, we had a session with Startup Funding Capital virtually, obviously, and ourselves to essentially for those brands to pitch.
I was going to say, is it kind of like you're saying like Dragon's Den, and I'm thinking pitch battle.
Yeah.
There's an element of pitching involved here for the brands. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's their opportunity to speak through the brand. We kind of organised samples ahead of that, just so that where samples were relevant, that was taken into account. So yeah, it's a pitch, grilling discussions. Come back to that a little bit as well. And then the end result being that when we originally started, the aim was that we would have, there would be one winner and they would receive that minimum 150k funding, as well as a partnership with the Red Tree. So we would work with them for a minimum of a year, so that we're really bringing all of that expertise and funding together. In the end, we had 2 winners because we couldn't choose. They were both fantastic. And actually, one of the third finalists also ended up getting funding from Startup Funding Capital. So absolutely amazing that 3 brands that came out of the programme got that funding. And I'm relatively sure on this, but majority of them got a lot more than 150k funding. And that was down to using the scheme, but also the angel investor network to increase the funding given to those as well. So there was, it was even more than 150k that they ended up getting.
So the accelerator really, because going out to find investment is quite it's quite daunting, but also quite vast when you think about it. It's like, oh my goodness, where do you even start? So what the accelerator is doing is bringing experts into one place. So it's almost collapsing the time that it takes a brand to get that, because you're putting the right people in front of them. They've just got to turn up and absolutely do the Dragon's Den bit, and you've sort of collapsed all that time and effort for them by bringing them all together.
Yeah, and we were really reassured that we were in complete agreement that what we're looking at from our beauty experience, and it's not just about, is the brand nice, it's looking at the profitability, and I'll come on to a little bit exactly what we looked at, but there was a real, we really came together that our vetting that we'd done first had set up, and we were in agreement with those ones that did really stand out.
So I think it's be really interesting then because there are now loads of people out there thinking, oh, okay, when this launches again, I'd love to get involved. So I think it'd be really lovely to explore from your experience of doing this through that first round, what is it the brands need to be putting in front of both you and startup funding in order to capture a place on the accelerator and to get that funding?
Okay, I'll answer that question, but I'll also answer it broadly in terms of total investment as well, because some of it is really relevant to that. So the first thing just to think about throughout the whole journey, less so when you're talking to us, but the majority of investors are sector agnostic. So they don't know about beauty, they don't know about the trends that are going on, where natural ingredients, anything else. And I think that's just a really important point to make first, that it's almost like explaining your business to your granddad that has never come across it before, because it's that level of information that you need to be thinking about when you're explaining it. Like I said, it's less so for us, but it needs to stand up anyway, from that perspective. In terms of what both ourselves and startup funding capital look for, the first and foremost is the person, the founder. And you probably come across this yourself, Rachel, but within all of, certainly all of the finalists, but even semi-finalists and entrants, we had some really interesting founders who had relevant experience that put them in good stead for the brands or the project that they were launching. And because of the stage, because you're talking about early stage investment, that is the biggest thing that the investors are looking for, that they see empathy from the founders, that they see an appetite for them to succeed. And they honestly, that is the biggest standout thing for them. And a lot of what I'll speak about next is really important, but they kind of have a broad opinion that if they like the people and if they believe in the people, that the rest of it can be sorted out afterwards. So that's where you need to kind of really get that balance of being charismatic versus committed, and like I said, just really explaining what relevant experience you have that puts you in good stead for being invested in.
Yeah.
Which, yeah, like I said, I'm sure that's kind of your bread and butter, really.
Yes, absolutely. It's what I'm always sort of working with brands on, to give them the courage and those skills to be able to be a more visible founder, isn't it? And it's being able to lead your brand. And I always find it quite interesting when you think about some of the most charismatic entrepreneurs out there, like sort of like, Branson or someone like that. They've sold so many different things. They've not stuck with a particular niche, yet people have continued to buy from them. And that's the power of being quite a charismatic person, that people trust you regardless of selling it. It's really interesting. And I guess from an investor's point of view, yes, early stage investment, when there's not a big brand behind you with years worth of sales evidence, they are investing in your ability, aren't they? Your courage and your strength to go and do it. Oh, that's really, really fascinating. Oh, go on then, keep going. What else?
I'll keep going. I've got more. Just within that, on the person level to it, is a big thing for the early stage investors as well, is that if there are not co-founders, that there is a plan in place to either build that team or get a co-founder, because they are really really aware that it's really difficult for one person to do that. And yeah, we've seen that from we all know how hard startup founders work. It's incredibly time consuming. So that's a really key point as well for brands that are going into that conversation. It won't necessarily sit well to have your plan being that you want to keep doing it just on your own for as long as possible, which in itself as well becomes more of a challenge, because when it's your baby, it can be difficult to delegate things. Some of the other things that they look for, aside from the person, is proof of concept. And there's a number of ways that that can be illustrated. Sales revenue is kind of like the golden ticket there. Mm-hmm. But there were a few interesting ways that the brands, particularly those at earlier stages, got around that. So one of the brands had a really successful Kickstarter campaign, which was pre-launch. Mm-hmm. And to investors, that's just like an immediate tick. And you don't have to have your stock already, but it's an illustration of people being so interested in your brand that they've pre-ordered. Yeah. So I would just absolutely recommend that to any brand looking to do that. Similarly, even at an early stage, things like your mailing list. So what are you doing to encourage people to join your mailing list, incentivizing them to be inviting other people to join. Again, another of the brands that did really well had 40k on their mailing list pre-launch. And that's just an immediate tick that there's appetite. Obviously, social media is really important as well. So anything around that sphere that is providing proof of concept. Yeah. And within that, if you are at a later stage, things like any retail listings is super important and will be well regarded. As an extension of that as well, there was one brand who had a fantastic concept, but the samples weren't quite ready. And it was a little bit like the investment would have helped to perfect that, but in the end, it was slightly too much of a gamble because it wasn't quite in the right place. Yeah. So proof of concept is really, really key. Opportunity to scale was one of the key aspects that we looked at. So in terms of, one, what will the investment do? And how will that be beneficial for the investor? So if you're pre-launch, obviously there's going to be huge opportunity from that perspective. If you are in certain retailers in the UK, but international is in your plan, all of those things, thinking about the future. So you're thinking about what the investor's going to get for their money, essentially. And then, so those are kind of the big ones. However, the obvious key metrics on sales, profitability, and knowing those, either have them in your pitch deck or have them ready to answer those. The really key areas that the investors, they will ask everyone, what's your profit per product? How does that change with the scalability? So knowing your numbers inside out.
Yeah, it does sound very Dragon's Den, doesn't it? But I mean, this is it. When you're going for investment, this is what, this is, they need to know that you're really in touch with what's happening inside your business and where you can go with it. So you began to talk, or you just mentioned there something that one brand who hadn't got the samples. So let's just follow that around a little bit further and say, what are, because I think this would be so useful, what are the common mistakes that you saw businesses make in this first round?
I think probably parking the samples for a minute, I think the biggest one is not succinctly explaining your concept. And kind of it really feeds into that first point about investors being industry agnostic, but for us as the screeners as well, if we didn't get the point of the brand, if we didn't get what was really standing it aside, we had a objective that we wanted the winning brands to be game changing. Yeah. That's obviously quite hard to define in itself what that means. So those that weren't able to succinctly explain their brands, may have had slightly less professional looking presentations versus those that were the other way, that I know they had practiced those presentations in and out. So that preparation is really key. And I think just similarly, particularly if you're just trying to be contacting investors, if you're going to ones that are only interested in later stage, then it will just make you look really unprofessional. So doing your research on the investors themselves as well, that they're at the right stage. And if you can also bring reference to investments that they've got in their portfolio and how those are similar to some of your offering, then that can be really useful.
Gosh, yeah, I can. It's one of these talks where I'm like thinking, wow, this is so interesting, because this is quite new to me. And I can imagine that there are lots of people out there frantically taking notes at this, because it's absolutely packed with some of the most incredibly useful, sort of, informative, almost like the tick list of what you need to do. So what we've covered lots there, but if you had to sort of fine tune it, what would be your top recommendations to brands who are trying to get traction with these investors?
So first of all is to network. So networking with both other founders and investors themselves. In the Beauty Accelerator, that allows for although it was end to end from like marketing to launch, it was quite a long period of time from actually those brands pitching to the investors to getting the investment was no more than 2 months, I would say. So, but generally, and again, particularly more at later stage investment, networking is really important. And we see some of the later stage investors, they will keep an eye on brands for 2 to 3 years and have a constant communication. So like I said, networking to other founders, networking to investors, hopefully we'll get those kind of pitch days back in terms of events and opportunities for you to try pitching, and also gaining feedback when you do that as well. So if it is a no, then find out why not. Another thing that's really key is that brands need to sign up for something called SEIS. We've got a whole article on it on our website, but it's basically it's like a dating profile for investment. So you kind of put it on if you're looking for investment. Investors can find you there. However, it also means that if you've signed up for that, then the investor gets a more beneficial deal as well. So one, it's a no-brainer from those perspectives, but equally it shows to the investors that you're more serious as well. So that can be done relatively easy as well. And then, like I said, using people like Kickstarter and other funding elements to show your proof of concept and gain revenue. That's really, really important. Being persistent and keeping going with it. And the last point is kind of, you could say it's a bit counterintuitive, but it's totally true, is to self-fund for as long as you can, because we know it's not easy to launch a brand, and it does take its own investment. And if you look at all of the case studies on raising investment, they all take far longer at the start, and then it's a lot easier going forward. And it all comes back to that proof of concept.
Yeah.
Because the earlier you are, the less proof of concept you have, and therefore you can't argue your case over why your business is really important to be investing in it. So it's not a cheap thing to do. However, that will mean that you are really well set up for getting the best deal on the investment that you've got.
Yeah.
Just, I guess, kind of a bit overarching there as well is being confident in yourself. So a lot of brands, if they've got really strong point of difference, a lot of the brands that I see, they need to be more confident in this, and not just from the investment perspective, but from everything that feeds into your investment. So your negotiations with even your distribution partners and everything that fits into that plan. And obviously some of those aspects in terms of proof of concept really feed into that as well. But to have that confidence and to be able to use that throughout your whole journey will just mean that you're far better set up, and that will really feed into what the investors are seeing.
Oh, that's really interesting, because I was talking to Wiz Selvi earlier this week, and she said something so similar, in that quite often as independent founders, there is a nervousness to be very bold about what you're doing. And she was very, in typical Wiz style, was very straight down the line. And she was like, you have to brag. You have to be able to stand up there and be so proud and so confident and just say, this is what I do and it's why it's amazing. And it's so great to see you pick that up and say, you've got to turn up with this utter self-belief in, and be very clear on what you're doing, and be so proud of it, and just get it out there.
Yeah, I think one thing I would just add on that as well, which is probably slightly different to kind of how you present your brand to investors versus retailers, is the retailer conversation is far more focused on your USPs, what's going to encourage the customer to buy it. Whereas particularly that competitor analysis that level is slightly different with the investors, in that they quite often see it as a benefit if you've got a competitor, because it's a copy and paste business for them. It's something that they can reference. They're a lot more, particularly if it's in the US and it's not come to the UK. They don't see that as that's a threat, it might come. They see it as that shows that they've got more confidence in the offer. So I think that's a really interesting slant for brands to be aware of as well, that don't shy away from the fact that you've got competitors when it comes to investment, because the investors actually can quite often see that as being a positive, because they see it as they can be get a piece of that pie.
That's a pearl of wisdom. That's a lovely way to sort of just start to bring this one to an end. I know that now there are lots of excited founders watching this who are starting to think, maybe I could do this. So to finish, when is the next sort of beauty accelerator opening up? And what should anybody out there who wants to be involved be doing right now to make sure they're sort of on your sort of radar?
So it will be launching around the same time that we did this year, so around August time, where and if, like we said, in terms of all of our newsletters and social media, that's where we'll announce the exact timings. But like I said, it's all to do with hitting the rounds that startup funding are going for. So that's why it's not confirmed yet exactly, but it won't change drastically because of that. So start working on your pitch deck, start thinking about all of the points we've spoken about. Reach out as well. We're very happy to start making contact with people who they think might be interested. Do your research on investment itself, have your business plan in place. So both the commercials that you've seen in terms of sales, revenue, profitability, but also what you would do with that money as well, and as accurate as possible. Because within the application process, we ask for a full business plan at that point, as well as a pitch deck and the application form being completed. So yeah, there's a lot to be getting on here.
This is good timing because we're January and you're going to be sort of around about the August time. So there's lots of time to take what advice you've given now and start to really, really work on that. So yeah, I think that's a really great place to end. Thank you so much for coming on, Fiona, and sharing all of that. It's a really interesting place, and I know a lot of the founders out there watching that will be really, really interested. And I'm sure you're going to have a big spike on your email list now so that everybody's in contact with you and they know it's coming. So yeah, thank you very, very much. Really appreciate you giving up your time, Fiona. Thank you for watching, everybody, and we will see you on the next video.